So here we are, back at the Jezail. I'm going to try and get some of these pieces apart, hopefully without damaging it any further. A few tools I'm going to use, a Dremel tool like this with a grindstone in the end. I just tested it and it is doing the job. I've got a finer bit here which I'll use in a little while. One of the concerns is this nail here, and I've just used a little piece of bicycle spoke actually, because this is usually quite nicely hardened metal and it's just the right thickness, and found that there is just here, there's a hole corresponding to the nail on the other side which is forming the pivot for the trigger, and I tapped that through and it is indeed pushing the nail out the other side, which means I've now got some grip on that nail, and I'll be able to use these carefully, not damaging the wood, to pull that nail out. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll try this old screw and see if we can get this lock plate out. Hopefully it should all be straightforward. So here we have it taken to pieces after a bit of fussing around. Grinding the heads off of this meant I did manage to prise it off without really damaging it any more than it already was. It's made some shiny bits, but that can all be put back good at a later date. Maybe even make some decorative nail heads to cover the grind marks that I've done, but this piece will need bending back, it all tapping back nice and smooth and into position, and I can possibly solder that shut just to give it a bit more strength. So that's that bit. The lock plate, I did actually test this before taking it off. I managed to grab the pinion there with a pair of pliers and clicked it to half cock and full cock, and it worked really well, and the trigger fired it as well. It's only a matter now of checking this against the design of the Patent 1853 Enfield, and we'll put this in an electrolysis bath to clean it up before doing anything else with it. That's the screw that held it in. Presumably, well, I don't know if that's the original screw. It doesn't look like it. It looks like a really roughly made screw, but we'll probably use that again. This is the little cover plate that was down here with the little sliding gate to go in there. This is the trigger. We'll put this, we'll clean this up. So what to do next? We've got these parts. Well, we'll get back to this in just a moment, and I'll just move that out of the way a second. The barrel is not going to concern us at just a moment. I'll talk about that later, so I'll move that out of the way. So this piece here, the lock plate, we'll put this in for de-rusting in an electrolysis bath. How I'll do this is I'll use sodium bicarbonate I've got here, so I'll use that, and I'll be using, there's a setup I've got here. It's a 12 volt charging unit, generic charging unit. I've rigged it up with crocodile clips, and as long as I'm cautious, because it's only running at 12 volt, then it's quite safe to use. I would normally do it in a plastic tub, but for our purposes here, I'm going to do it in a glass jar. The lock plate sits in there quite nicely. It can be completely submerged, and we can film the process looking through the side. We can see it de-rusting, so we'll use that on this occasion. We'll also put the trigger in to the bath, and there's this rather nasty plate that the trigger came through. This was set into the frame. We'll clean that up as well, and maybe put that screw in. I think, yeah, we can put them all in together, and we can let electricity do the work for us. So I'll set that up. I'll show you it set up, and then we can move on back to the stock and have a look there. So here we have the electrolysis rig set up in the glass jar. Have a nice piece of mild steel here on the anode, and all the parts are wired together and attached to make the cathode. Just come in, maybe the camera will pick up all the bubbles. There's the trigger nearest us. Hopefully that's a process that's going through all of that steel in there. At some point the muck that will form on there, it'll turn black, the rust will, and it can all be wiped down and brushed down and then put back into the bath again for another 1 or 2 treatments should do it. So that's what's happening there at the moment. Here's looking down onto the electrolysis, and you've got a scum is forming on the top already. That's all sorts of muck being moved and floating to the surface. And we should have hydrogen and oxygen rising from there, so no naked flames in this area. We'll get back to it. Let's come back and have a look at it in an hour. I'll set the alarm for 1 hour to tell me to check it out. So back to the stock, our sinned stock. With the cover on there, my theory about this being a matchlock would mean that would require a hole in the wood in that position as well. And what I had wondered is if somebody had blocked that hole when it was converted to a side lock in order to stop bits falling down into the lock. So I had assumed when I took this off that I would find evidence of a wooden insert in there, and I brushed it clean, and in fact it's actually very difficult to tell whether there's something in there. I don't know whether it's my imagination. I don't know what the camera could pick up. There seems to be a slightly different coloration of wood in this area here, as if somebody has bashed a wedge in. And then looking inside there, again difficult to tell. Similarly, we'd need to have here a hole that runs all the way through. So this is not looking very promising in terms of my original theory. Not sure whether there's a wedge in there. If there is a wedge in there, it's been put in so well that I can't see it. So it doesn't kind of support my theory here. There's no evidence also looking down in there that there's a hole that would run down here. So we'll leave the origins of this piece open to question for the moment. But that part aside, the barrel, as it turns out, I found a piece of brass pipe that I had which fits quite snugly in the end of the barrel, and that comes out at that comes out at 0.58 inches. Also, shining a torch down the barrel, I don't know if it's wishful thinking, but it looks as if there has been some kind of attempt at rifling this barrel. It's just not apparent at the muzzle, and it might be that there's a splay at the muzzle there, but when you, I don't think I'll be able to get it on the camera, but it's very faint. It would have been a very badly done job. So we'll return to these in a while, and we'll go and finish off the electrolysis and get those parts cleaned up and have a look at those. Here we are back an hour later with the electrolysis See, we've got a nice scum forming on the top here, and we've still got some bubbles rising. So I'll leave that just a little longer. I'll try another half an hour because it's still bubbling nicely. And let's see if any more scum comes off of this. Back in a while. So here we have the pieces clean out of the solution, and there's going to be a lot more time needed to clean this up. There's nothing to indicate there's any numbers on here to indicate a maker, so we'll just have to keep going with those. That's going to take more time. So this is the state of play at the moment. We've got a bit of an anomaly here. That this part suggests, looking at the woodwork though, that in fact it was made for some kind of lock, maybe originally a flint lock and later converted to a percussion lock. So we now need to know how to proceed. Do we run with this wood? What maybe kind of repair could be done here, and whether we need to extend the stock at all. So we've got an anomalous lock here, but it would be nice to reuse it, and we could put these pieces back and see what happens. So back soon, hopefully.